Hello and welcome to Instant Transmission, a podcast where we discuss everything Dragon Ball and the secret to making your power pole extend. Tonight is finally the night we begin tackling the new 2024 release of Dragon Ball Daima. It's new to us, new to you, and we've got 3 episodes ready to break down right after the buzz has already started dying down. I'm your host, Dayton, and once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Todd.
Hi.
And tonight's discussion covers the first 3 episodes of Daima, specifically the sub. Because Daima is so new, we're currently discussing possibly continuing the series with the dub to compare how the two sound and feel with no nostalgia glasses getting in the way. This is not set in stone, and Daima's release schedule may not line up with our release schedule, so we're playing it by year at this point. So with all of that covered, was there anything you wanted to add before we got things started, Todd?
The only other thing, and this is not Daima related, but certainly Dragon Ball related, is I just wanted to acknowledge that we are also aware that the video game, the Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, has come out within the past couple of weeks, and it is very well liked from the community. I've gotten to watch a few of the what if scenarios on YouTube. I haven't played it myself, but that might be something that we dive into in the future, as both Dayton and I were big fans of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi games decades ago at this point. But it's on the radar, but we're going to be covering Daima first.
Yeah, and I mean the clips are even showing up like in my feeds and stuff like that, so it must be pretty popular if I'm seeing it. And I'm
not in your newsfeed, but yeah, it's all over my newsfeed, that's for sure.
All right, and with that covered, I think we're ready to dive into episode 1, which is Conspiracy. And Daima kicks off with this brief overview of the story so far up to this point, and it seems like the show takes place before Dragon Ball Super, and during this newly animated coverage of everything that's happened up through Boo, we get to see some moments that are recast in today's quality animation. And so there's some cool scenes that we're kind of given privy to, but before we get into that stuff, we also get a first reveal of a new setting that's right after. I don't know if you want to talk about the recap at all, but it was some stills and just some new up-to-date looking art for the most part.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like right now you're talking about I think it's like maybe 2 minutes of a very broad strokes recap. I mean, it very briefly touches on everything that happened in the original Dragon Ball, then into Dragon Ball Z and up to present day.
And it explains like what the Dragon Balls are and what Saiyans are. Like it seems like it's kind of introducing people who may have never really experienced Dragon Ball to the Dragon Ball universe.
Yeah, which if you haven't and you're watching Daima, what in the world are you doing? But
what a weird jumping in point.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's something we'll have to talk about too, because this whole thing, this whole first episode, it's longer than a normal episode. I think it's over 32 minutes long, which they're normally like 24 minutes or so. And it's definitely designed and laid out in a way that feels like it's trying to cater to people who have never watched Dragon Ball before.
Yeah, and we'll see more of that because in just a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to ship past the kind of the explanation of the universe, what the Dragon Balls are, the events that have happened so far, who Goku and the Z Fighters are. We shift over to this red structure that looks like it's built into like these like giant vines, very ominous looking building. I think it's even floating if I'm not mistaken. But it's a brief shot, and then we flip to the inside of the building, where we see 2 characters standing amidst this very busy room that's a mixture of like these old stone walls and then like what looks like a grid, like a planetary grid around them that's showing like videos of things happening.
Yeah, this is interesting. And this is a scene that, or at least pieces of it, are scenes that we've seen in the trailers up to this point. Dayton and I did some coverage on some of those, and I think at least a few of our assumptions were correct in that this is definitely, we'll kind of find out as we go through here, that the smaller character, this small imp-like character that we see who's watching these videos is part of the demon realm. Well, we'll just give names early, so it's easy for us. But that's going to be Goma, potentially King Goma, and then the other one is, I don't think he's a Kai himself, but he is connected to the Supreme Kai. His name is Degesu.
Yeah, and all this is very weird to me. I don't think I like how they did this introduction because we did a recap and then we also do another recap afterwards. Because that's what this is they're kind of recapping the Boo saga. Um, After we just recapped everything kind of up through the Boo saga ish. And so we're watching these characters react to these different scenes of all the Z fighters fighting against Bobbity and Boo and all the events that unfold. And so the biggest takeaway from this is not, I guess, the recap itself. It's more of their reaction to the events that have happened. So one thing I'd like to point out is that they refer to ki energy as like magic. They're like not familiar with it, which was a very interesting point.
That is super interesting. I honestly, I have a lot of mixed feelings. So this takes up probably the first 10 minutes of the episode or
Yeah,
so.
it's not a short scene. Like between the first recap and now the quote unquote second recap, it's a third of the episode.
Yeah, 100%. Which, admittedly, it is an extended episode, so you could almost consider what comes after this as like a normal length episode. So it's kind of additional. So I kind of give it a little bit more leeway because of that. And it is important to see how these characters respond to the events in the Boo arc. So it feels at least somewhat necessary because of that. I did feel kind of the same way that you're expressing though, Dayton, where I part of it is just how much time we spend on this recap. The pacing of it feels a little bit off to me, but also like on the flip side of that, I really liked getting to see the Boo arc redone in this new beautiful animation. It's like such a truly it's a cock tease. I would love to see all of Dragon Ball redone in this animation.
See, I felt the same way about it because I wanted to write more than I was able to because it's literally just a few quick scenes that are reanimated. So like the scene with Vegeta firing a blast into the crowd is reanimated here, and Goku tries to get into the way but he's blasted aside, and I mean it's 5-10 seconds but it's beautifully animated.
Gorgeous.
This is what, when we sat down to start watching Kai, this is what I actually wanted, was a reanimation of the original Dragon Ball in today's styling, and then cutting out the filler. It would have been such a hit with me. And I love seeing these iconic old scenes remastered like this. They look fantastic. We get to see Vegeta's sacrifice, which looks fantastic. And there's a couple small scenes where Majin Vegeta and Goku are exchanging blows in their bout. And there's a key blast that looks fantastic during this too. I mean, there's a lot of good things for me to say, but it's also brief that it leaves me wanting more, which is probably a good thing. You probably do want to tease people at the beginning of a series.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It gets you hyped up for it. There's a good bit of nostalgia because we're getting to see some of the best moments of the Boo arc, and it's just some great moments from Z. And I've heard some people online already being like, I've seen some people make videos. I think Totally Not Mark has a great one about what it would look like to do a full remake of Dragon Ball. And this has people kind of thinking about what that could actually be. So I think I've mentioned on the podcast before that I would love to see a full remake too. And I mean, maybe Toei Animation will hear the fans out and think about it.
I mean, I think the middle ground is just give us a set of movies that rehash it, like the Battle of Gods. Just give us that treatment of Z, and I'm perfectly happy with that. Like that, it would be such a good watch. Also, this is something we've talked about before. It's hard to get people into Dragon Ball like today, just because there's no real good launching endpoint that I can recommend to, I guess, an average person. Do you want to sit down and watch how many hundreds of episodes in the original Z? Kai goes way too fast at the beginning, and I don't think you truly understand what's going on. It's coming up with some movies that puts a nice bow tie and everything that's in digestible chunks that people could sit down, watch through, and then suddenly they're caught back up and we can watch the new content. I would love that. But I'm going off on a tangent. I'm way off subject over here.
I mean, I kind of took us there, but yeah, I mean, kind of moving back to Daima here, the only, I think my biggest complaint is just how much time we spend on this. The pacing on it feels a little bit like it just feels a little bit too much time sunk into it. Otherwise, I actually quite enjoy it, but we get a few little nuggets that are important about these characters, Goma and Degesu. They, like you said, Dayton, they kind of see Ki as like they call it magic. They're surprised that there are these people in, I think they say, the outside world who are so powerful. They recognize Piccolo as a Namekian, so that's significant. And then they also they watch as the characters summon Shenron from the Dragon Balls, and they recognize the Dragon Balls. They're like, oh, these are different than our Dragon Balls. They have 7 balls instead of 3, I think is what they express. And then they also express that this doesn't look like Purunga like they're used to. And they even go so far as to like start making notes about Shenron and how they summon him and everything.
Yeah, and I really like the characters design of these two characters, right? Of both of them standing next to each other. You have Degesu, who looks very proper. He's dressed well. His garb is very similar to that of what you see Supreme Kai in. He's very clean cut. And then you look at Goma, who's like short. He almost looks like a jester with like the lines coming down from his eyeballs and kind of the mixed match black and red colors that he's wearing with the white face. So these characters contrast each other a lot. And I know you've mentioned before that Toriyama likes developing characters that are kind of opposites, and I think he's done a great job here.
I agree. I love their character designs. I love the introduction of these characters. I mean, you get the impression that, I mean, our Lord Goma, I think, as Degesu calls him, Goma is, he looks like a little imp. He's got like these funny horns. He's even like, his mouth and his expressions are very animated and exaggerated, whereas Degesu is much more calm and collected for the most part. But they watch as they specifically also hone in on Dabura getting killed. This is an important detail, especially as we come to the end of this kind of like Boo recap. They watch Boo and Bobbity get killed as well. And I think, unless there are any other details you want to cover in the recap part, Dayton, this kind of takes us to Degesu telling Goma, with Dabura gone, the Lord of the Demon Realm, killed, that makes you, Goma, now the King of the Demon Realm.
Yeah, he's because he mentioned it before about watching Dabura be killed like that. He's now the king of the demon realm. And this is where the story starts picking up and moving, because it's at around this time that we see Degesu's sister, Dr. Rinsu, arrive on scene. And there's kind of some turmoil between these characters as they begin talking about whether her research, whatever that is going to continue to be funded by the Demon King, the now Demon King, Goma. And he says, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to keep funding your research. I don't know if I care. And this is where she warns him that defunding her research could open up the demon realm to attacks from powerful beings, such as the ones that defeated Boo. And this idea kind of sticks in Goma's head as he begins worrying about the safety of his realm.
This is interesting because, I mean, you get the impression that Goma is he's not the brightest character, to be frank. And so Dr. Arinsu comes in here kind of pulling the strings. And I want to know, as the audience, I want to know, what is Dr. Arinsu playing at? Like, what is her goal here? Like, does she want the throne? Is she trying to get Goma kicked off the throne so she can take over? I don't know. It leaves the audience with lots of questions, which is a good thing. Like, I'm curious to see and know more.
Yeah, but the only thing I'm sure of is that her character has selfish motives that will be revealed later, and her ploy works because Goma decides that he's going to utilize Earth's Dragon Balls because the Dragon Balls in the Demon Realm, he can't use them. Apparently, they're unavailable. These three guardians that guard the three Dragon Balls prevent him from utilizing them, so he's going to use Earth's Dragon Balls to turn these threatening fighters into children so they are no longer a threat. And Purunga gives 3 wishes, and he begins thinking about his next 2 wishes, which would be wishing for the evil third eye, which is some sort of ancient artifact that would give him unbelievable power. And then he briefly discusses with Dagesu giving him the 3rd wish, but it's not really decided.
I even like this like back and forth between Dagesu and Goma, where Dagesu asks for the wish and Goma's like, I'll consider it. Like you can clearly feel the power dynamic here. It's very well done. I wanted to mention too, I'm trying to keep track of all these different names and terms because we get a lot thrown at us as the audience. Those guardians in the demon realm. So the demon realm has those 3 Dragon Balls, and those guardians are called the Tamagamis. I can only assume they are going to be important.
I used to have one of those in middle school. I think you had to like feed it and water it or something like that.
I imagine that's what they have to do to get them to guard the Dragon Balls.
Yeah. There's also a brief mention. I don't have this written down, but they mentioned that these Demon Realm Dragon Balls use dark magic, and the Earth's Dragon Balls use light magic. So there's like a difference in the capability of the Dragon Balls that's not really specified, but it's something they mentioned where like you can't wish for someone to be dead with the Earth's Dragon Balls.
That's a good point. That's it. That leaves more questions. Now I'm like, okay, is that do the Earth's Dragon Balls have light magic or whatever because they're on Earth, because Earth is, they consider it generally good? Is it because Dende was the one who created those Dragon Balls? Are the bad ones because bad, or the ones in the Demon Realm evil because they're in the Demon Realm, or because of who made them? Millions of questions going through my head.
We're in the first episode, so hopefully we'll get to some of it. But yeah, it's at this point that also Dr. Rinsu is aware of all these plans. Turns out she's been kind of like leaving but not leaving and kind of spying this whole time. That is sort of an important note. But yeah, they decide to start executing on their plan. Goma and Dagesu decide to pick up is it Neva or Neva?
Neva.
Who is this ancient Namekian who actually helped with the Demon Realm Dragon Balls. They decide to pick him up since he's familiar with the Dragon Balls and take him along for the ride to go search out Earth's Dragon Balls.
Right. There's a tiny detail in there is
There's
that we
so
do
many
see
little details in this first episode.
It's just packed, man, which is great, but it's tough to get through as far as like us talking about it because there's so many. But there's a character who this is our first time seeing him. We haven't been introduced to him yet, but he's got like blue skin, pointy ears, tall, white spiky hair with like a purple jacket, and he was spying on Dagesu and Goma's entire conversation about watching the people, like watching Goku and his friends, and watching their plan to get the Dragon Balls from Earth. So that's going to come in. It's going to be important later.
Yeah. So after all the spying and talking and picking up the old, and Neva's a weird guy, by the way. He's definitely kind of in his own world a little bit. But they pick him up. We learn that he smells and he hasn't showered in years. Important point, I guess. But they get on this like really small ship and they fly out to head to Earth. And the way they head to Earth is interesting. There's like this giant mechanical fish in the sky, and you have to have like a pin number to access it. And then there's a portal inside of it. And that portal goes to like, I don't know, like a realm of portals, and then you have to take the correct one. Like it's this big, complicated process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know. It feels very much, especially because you have to like. We just learned that Goma is like the Demon King now, and so the fact that he has to show respect to this big fish thing. They call the fish Warp Sama, and it's a funny little Dragon Ball gag.
I actually like the world building that like this is how they travel between realms, and I don't, it's fun. I actually do enjoy this.
Yeah, it's cool. It's weird for sure, but it's neat. So they got to give the pin number to Warp Sama. That kind of teleports them outside of the demon realm, and I think that actually takes us to Earth, where we're having a birthday party for our 9-year-old Saiyan boy Trunks.
Oh, is that what the party was for? For some reason, I didn't catch that. I must have been writing down notes or something. I was like, I don't know what this party's for. I'm guessing it's another Bulma birthday party, but Trunks also makes sense.
Yeah. It feels like, honestly, the whole setup feels like Bulma's birthday from the Battle of Gods movie, or in the beginning of Dragon Ball Super. It's got the very, very similar vibe to it.
We're at this party. All the familiar faces are there, including Supreme Kai and Kibito, and they're separate. And I like that they touched on this, that because they were fused with the Patara earrings, which is normally permanent. But what they did is they observed Goku and Vegeta have their fusion broken up by Buu when he absorbed them. So they actually asked Buu to do the same thing, so that way they could become separated. So I'm glad they at least utilized established something or another.
This is super interesting to me, mostly because in Dragon Ball Super, the Patara earring fusion being permanent was retconned, or at least explained in a different way, where they express that because like Goku and Vegeta were not gods, or whatever the case is, that the time for the Patara fusion was limited, just like the fusion dance. So this is like, and yeah, okay, so they're kind of still expressing like, okay, because these guys are gods, it's semi-permanent, but this is just another way to get rid of the Patara fusion, or to decouple those fused characters. I kind of like it, but honestly, I wish that this retcon would be the only retcon.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. It's also weird because, I mean, Super didn't come out that long ago, and they retconned, and now we're retconning again. Like, it feels, I don't know. Well, then again, this is not too big of a leap because it's already kind of I don't know. It's really weird.
It is weird. Like this, honestly, this was like a fan theory before Super came out, was that something about Boo's biology is what separated Vegito. But and I actually, I'm perfectly okay with this being the explanation for the separations. I just wish that we didn't get that retcon in Super about the time limit for mortals. It just makes it too easy to undo this, what should otherwise be a permanent fusion.
Yeah, I don't know. Fusion's its own category anyway, so I'm not going to get too lost in the weeds on that. But they touch on it. Kibito's separate from Supreme Kai. They needed those two to be separated. This is their way of doing it. But yeah, they're all at this birthday party. Goku eats and decides that he's full and wants to spar. So Vegeta also finishes eating, and they decide to go up overhead and give themselves a nice little sparring bout in the clouds. And blows are exchanged. The animation's beautiful here. At every point of impact, we see like the clouds blasting in directions away from them. It's very smooth. There's even a point where they fire ki blasts at each other, and there's kind of this very brief ki struggle where Goku kind of charges through the like aftermath of it and gets a good solid blow on Vegeta. It's a fun little exchange.
I mean, it's beautiful. The choreography is fine. Like, it's nothing extravagant, but there's, I mean, it's even the beam struggle is visually a callback to the Saiyan arc, the Gallic Gun Kamehameha beam struggle.
Oh yeah, I could feel like the elbow in my ribs, like
100%. But I mean, the visuals are gorgeous, man. You could tell they took their time on this. The Gallic Gun beam that Vegeta fires is beautiful. It's really cool. It's just a really cool taste of the fighting in Daima.
And that's what this feels like. Is this isn't a full course meal right here. This is just like a very good appetizer. Because I mean, It's another very brief scene of really cool stuff that I wish I would have just gotten more of, especially because Daima is such a short series anyway. Come on, give me a little extra.
I know exactly what you mean. That's we'll have to talk once we finish the 3 episodes about pacing in this, because it's interesting to me, given that it's supposed to be a shorter series. But we do kind of cut from that little teaser of combat over to Kame's lookout, or I suppose what is now Dende's lookout, with Dende and Popo, and they're kind of like watching the party, but their viewing is interrupted by a spaceship that lands on Dende's lookout with Goma, Degesu, and Neva. I don't know if it's Neva or Neva, actually. It's one of those two, but our new Namekian friend.
Yeah. And they get out of the ship. Degesu's actually fairly respectful to Dende, which I do like, but Goma demands that Dende gather the Dragon Balls. And Dende says, obviously, I can't just do that. And so this is where Neva starts unveiling some Namekian powers I was not aware of, which is being able to sense where they all are, summoning all of them to his location. So if you thought gathering the Dragon Balls was trivial before, this was the most trivial gathering of the Dragon Balls I've ever seen. The Dragon Balls are currently on cooldown after being used in the Buu saga. And so he just waves his hand and charges them back up. So their stone form reverts back to their golden orange, beautiful, powered up state. So there's a lot of hand waviness happening right here.
I'm like, man, I've said it time and time again that the Dragon Balls themselves are probably my least favorite part about Dragon Ball, because they just get rid of consequences. And unfortunately, Dragon Ball continues to make using the Dragon Balls and making these wishes easier and easier and easier, and introducing more and more sets of Dragon Balls, as we just got a new set introduced in Daima with the Demon Realm. And now there's a Namekian who can gather them. And not only gather them from wherever they are, but remove them from cooldown mode. Like, I get that they are, the important part here that they're trying to express is that this Namekian is very powerful. They even start to express, well, I think it's coming up here, but they'll give us a little bit more information about who Neva is.
Yeah. But the Dragon Balls are assembled, they're recharged, and Dende tries to stop them from summoning Shenron, but Degesu basically gives him like a strike to the neck and knocks him down, and tells him to back off. And Shenron is summoned, and that, I believe, wraps up this episode, unless there was anything you wanted to add.
I think they get to use the Dragon Balls for their wish right before the end of the episode here, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So they make their first wish, and after specifically clarifying that he not just wants them turned into children, but first graders, and that all the children, he wishes for all the people involved in the battle against Buu to be turned into first graders, and then all the children that were involved in the battle against Buu to be turned into babies.
I like this exchange too, because Goma asks for them to be turned into children, and Shenron's like, all right, well, how old are we talking? Yeah. Like, he gets real nitty gritty about the details.
It's really funny. So at this point, the wish is submitted and the episode ends, which brings us into a very closely related episode 2, Glorio. And yeah, all the Z fighters are turned into children and babies. And as we're waiting for the second and third wishes, apparently that's not going to happen. I don't know where we are in the timeline, but Shenron says, nope, no second and third wishes. These are reserved specifically for regulars, which blows my mind. I don't know what the hell's going on.
I want to hear your take on this. So like my take is, I both like and dislike this with Shenron saying this, because it feels somewhat kind of like contrived and silly. Like, oh, well, they wanted to limit Goma to one wish, obviously. And so they had Shenron be a very sassy dragon, like Oh no, three wishes only for regulars, which is like it's also on the positive side. It's a really funny gag, and it's a funny characterization of Shenron to be like, "Nah, dude, fuck you. I only give 3 wishes to the guys who summon me like every year that I'm available."
Yeah, and I mean, this was jarring to me at first because I was like, what the hell's going on? And then I have to kind of reset my brain and remember Daima is a little bit more laid back and fun. This isn't our traditional like Dragon Ball story. You know, I guess put a lot of the serious notes kind of on pause for a moment and just kind of have fun with the experience going through it, because I think that's what this moment is trying to help illustrate to me. It's supposed to set my expectations accordingly.
Yeah. It feels like whatever the case is here, this is a barrier so that Goma can't get his hands on. You had the name of it, Dayton. What was it called? The evil
Evil
eye,
third eye, I believe.
Yeah. So it's we're getting foreshadowing because this eye is almost certainly going to come into play somewhere down the line. But Goma's not going to get easy access to it for whatever reason.
Ooh, can I tell you
Um,
my theory about the eye?
I would love to hear it.
My theory is that the evil third eye is actually going to be the contained soul or whatever it is of the previous King Deborah. Not Deborah like we just knew, but his father. It's gonna be his
Abra.
soul contained into an artifact. Goma's gonna get it in a desperate like bid for power and put it on and then be possessed. I think that's what's gonna happen. That's my guess.
Oh, I hope so. I think we glossed over that detail actually, or maybe you said it, Dayton, because I actually wanted to point out I really like Deborah's father's name, but his name is Abra, so Abra Kadabra.
I didn't catch that. That's so good.
So it's Abra Kadabra Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo.
Oh, that's so fun. I freaking love it. That is very Dragon Ball. Well, 10 out of 10.
I love that pun name, but the important detail there, besides the pun name, is that the evil third eye was somehow it's usually given to like the demon king, and it was lost with when Abara was king for whatever reason. We don't get specific, so I like your theory. That will be interesting to see if that's the case.
All right. Calling it now, but we don't have the additional wishes. We don't have the evil third eye. We have all the Z fighters being children. We have Dende specifically being a baby. And Goma decides that I think there's a second where he thinks about just killing Dende to like get rid of the Dragon Balls, but when he sees that cute, adorable little green face looking at him, he decides to just take him captive in case any funny business happens. So the baby Namekian is grabbed up and everyone jumps into the little spaceship and off they go.
Yeah, I mean we also get to see baby Popo here with his little horns and stuff. This is we kind of shoot back over to the party, and we get to see like Krillin is one of the earliest people we see, which is fun. He's back to being bald baby Krillin or kid Krillin. We get to see Goku and Vegeta. I mean, we get to see basically all of our protagonists. We get to see Mr. Satan with no facial hair as a child, with his still big poofy hair. Bulma's pretty pleased with herself, seeing herself young again. This is just like, a lot of people have compared this concept to Dragon Ball GT. I don't know. It is similar in that way a little bit, but we've got basically the whole cast as children this time.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because even like Bulma and Chi Chi and Kibito and Supreme Kai, they're all kids, right? And there's a brief scene of Goten and Trunks being like babies, and were they like telepathically talking to each other or something? Did I understand that correctly?
I'm not sure if they were. I don't know. If they were, I missed that.
I don't know. It was weird. But yeah, everyone's kids. Everyone has little bodies and big heads, which is how you know they're a kid. And this is where we see Piccolo and Goku, Supreme Kai, and Kibito, they decide to head over to the lookout where they sensed kind of an evil energy to figure out what was going on. And this is where they arrive, and Child Popo decides to fill them in on the entire situation. So they basically get the lowdown. They need to save Dende. They need to reverse this. But Supreme Kai can't travel to the demon realm with his teleporting powers. So he's going to have Kibito grab a spaceship that needs to be fixed up by Bulma before they can head over to the demon realm. There's a lot of steps to what's happening.
Yeah, they're putting a lot of barriers in place, and we'll find out here by the end of this episode, like kind of why. But it's pretty clear that they're creating all of these barriers so that we can get some time with basically just Goku and Shin are going to be, well, we'll find out as we move forward. They're going to be part of the adventuring party here, but as
also, an interesting thing to note here too is that since they were turned into children, they're having difficulty flying.
Yeah. Goku and Piccolo both try, and they're basically expressing that they haven't figured out their balance as a child yet. So there's, I mean, again, more and more barriers. All of these things making it. We're bringing the power scaling down quite a bit with this, and that was Goma's goal with the wish. So valid, makes sense.
I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to poke holes in it. We're trying to establish a certain power level and a certain set of circumstances here. So I'm going to hand wave it. Cool. For some reason, Goku can't fly, even though he's like God level power. But because he's a kid, he can't fly. Okay, whatever. I accept it. We're trying to do something.
Yeah. I'm fine with it. Like it's a little contrived, but whatever. He obviously cannot, or at least they don't even show him try to use instant transmission, but apparently that's not going to be a thing for him either as a child. But we get Kibito brings back the spaceship. This is interesting because this is Shin's old spaceship. This really has it has similar vibes to when Gohan and Krillin were going to go to Namek after the Saiyan arc, and they found Kami's old spaceship. This kind of has vibes of that. So Shin basically expressed that I think that he took this spaceship out of the demon realm when he left the demon realm to go to the outside world. But it's pretty banged up. Apparently it got banged up while Goku, Vegeta, and Buu were fighting on the worlds of the Kais in the Buu arc.
And it's also old. I mean, this ship is who knows how many thousands or millions of years. I don't know how old Shin is at this point, but considering he's kind of a god level being, he could be any amount old. So the ship has been left in disrepair for a long time as well. And of course, they bring Bulma in because she's the resident genius, and she takes a look at it and says, "I'll need 10 days to get this thing fixed up." That's how long it takes to work on a magical ancient spaceship to get it to traverse different realms again. And so now we have this timer. In 10 days, we're going to go to the demon realm. We also learn around this point kind of a weird info drop that most beings with pointy ears are originally from the demon realm, including Namekians. So this is kind of oh, wow, you guys are radically changing my understanding of the story.
This is super interesting. There's a million things I would love to talk about this, but the two things I really want to point out is, one, this is wild to think about that any character with pointy ears is in some way derived from the demon realm.
Likely. They said it's very likely, but not guaranteed, I believe is the way that they say it.
That's an important detail. That's I'm glad you pointed that out. But I think that they do express like the Namekians. Popo has pointy ears. I mean, there's many characters, but the other thing that I really like about this is that this almost retcons the retcon of Demon King Piccolo not being a demon.
I didn't even think about that. That's so good.
It's so good.
Okay, I like this retcon. I'm in. I buy it 110%. If just to make the memes die.
I love this. So, who was originally dubbed Demon King Piccolo in the original Dragon Ball, we found out in Dragon Ball Z that he was actually an alien from space, from planet Namek. Now we're coming full circle and finding out that the Namekians are actually from the demon realm. So he still is a demon. I love that detail.
Good for it. Finally validated. Finally
uh,
approved. Thank you, Demon
uh,
King Piccolo. You live up to the name.
I love that little retcon. But this turns into, for the story, Goku is kind of training and he's like, man, I can't figure out my range for fighting. This is a challenge. And so he goes on a mini quest here to find his power pole or his Nyoibo. So he talks to Korin. Korin's like, I haven't seen it. Maybe ask Master Roshi. And Master Roshi's character design as a child also is absolutely hilarious with no beard. He's got the bald head. Still hitting on the ladies because it's Roshi. And Master Roshi has been using the power pole to dry his laundry.
And this is funny because in the original Dragon Ball series, he has apparently all these ancient artifacts. He just like loses them. They're around the house. He like sits on them as like furniture and stuff like that. He does not respect these ancient, powerful artifacts at all. Even the Nimbus, he was kind of like, I mean, the Nimbus wasn't working for him because oddly enough, his heart wasn't pure. But even
Shocker.
the Nimbus, he was just like, whatever, kid, you can have this stupid cloud.
Yeah, it's consistent with his character. It's a good throwback to, I think it was the I think it's called the Bancho fan.
Yes.
That Goku was trying to get from Master Roshi, and I can't remember what he was using it for. Maybe like a floor mat or something.
Doorstop or something.
Yeah, something ridiculous where he was like just disrespecting these ancient magical artifacts. So, I mean, good callback. I'll give it to him on that.
And Goku gets his power pole and he shows back up at Bulma's place, I believe, and everyone's sitting out there eating, and Goku whips out his power pole. And we get this, it's very well animated of him pulling out the power pole and kind of twirling it back and forth and swinging it out and dropping down into I think a fairly iconic stance of him wielding the power pole with his foot forward and body leaning back with the tip of the staff pointing up in the air. I mean, 10 out of 10 animation quality. It looks great.
And these are just little, like every little moment looks good, right? Like it's not necessarily a super significant, like big fight or anything. So props to them on that. This kind of turns into they're just kind of sitting around eating food, and another spaceship shows up on Kami's lookout at nighttime this time, and this is the reintroduction of the character that we saw watching Degesu and Goma in the Demon Realm. We find out his name to be Glorio, and he's here to recruit Goku to defeat King Goma.
Yeah, it's wild because you can tell he's from the demon world. He's got the pointy ears. He's got kind of this, bluish, purplyish, I don't know what color because it's also night out skin. And he reveals some details that he's working on behalf of the king of the third demon world, if I'm using all the terminology here correctly, because I'm learning all this at the same time that he's kind of telling me this. And I mean, our crew is obviously a little skeptical, but it doesn't take long for Goku to agree to go with him, to go save Dende and to go fight the Demon King Goma. And Supreme Kai also decides to accompany them since he's actually familiar, at least somewhat familiar, with the demon realm. So he should be able to help Goku on his quest here.
And I mean, we're already getting the questing party together, and another one of these barriers to entry is going to be that Glorio's spaceship can only hold 3 people because I think Vegeta in particular insists like, hey, I'm going. I don't want to be a kid anymore. I'm going to go fuck this guy up. But he's kind of put on the back burner to wait for Bulma to fix the Shin's ship so that they can follow Glorio and Goku and Shin. But Bulma does get to take a look at Glorio's ship and use it for reference. I think she says something like, that'll reduce, now that she has a point of reference for the ship and fixing it, it'll reduce the time to, I think it was 3 days if I remember. It's something less than 10.
Yeah, and okay, so at some point they mentioned this. I think it's slightly the future, but I want to mention it now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where they touch on the fact that these demon world ships, they function using magic. So I don't understand how Bulma looking at a ship that works off of magic would help her build her ship that I guess maybe also works. I don't know how all this makes any sense, like to a technological person, magic spaceships.
I get what you mean. The only thing that I could possibly try to explain that away in my head is that maybe they have some sort of mechanical magic generator or something. That's my hand wave bullshit answer to that.
I'll buy. I mean, it's just, man, Dragon Ball treads some pretty scary territory when it comes to making any sort of rules to the world. I'm just like, all right, whatever. It's a magical spaceship, and all you have to do is look at it, and you can make magical spaceships. But Bulma has been established to be the person who is what Goku is to fighting. Bulma is to like devices. So if there's anyone who could figure it out, it's got to be her.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give it to her. Like I like Bulma still being useful to the story, and that's kind of her role. So, but this also, we find out, actually, I think you mentioned this earlier, Dayton, that the demon world is divided up into like 3 sections. And Shin is kind of given Glorio like the 3rd degree. Like he seems suspicious of Glorio. He keeps asking him like, which demon realm are you from? Why are you here to get help to bring down King Goma? And Glorio's pretty evasive. Like this guy keeps all of his cards close to his chest. So,
and his emotions are very, I guess, like, well, non-existent. He's almost like a soldier, a robot or something, where his answers are very short and they're very straightforward. And there's like really no emotion to this character. He's kind of a little unnerving.
That would be so funny if this guy turned out to be an android, but
it was the Red Ribbon Army the whole time. Damn it.
They just keep coming back every time.
And it's at around this point, because all this stuff bleeds together pretty closely, that we enter the episode 3, which is titled Daima. And this is where all of our Goku, Supreme Kai, and Glorio all get on a ship and they start making their way towards the demon realm. And we get some more information on how this works. This is where they teleport to not teleport, or travel to the nearest gateway, I guess is what I would call it. The nearest access point to go to the demon realm, which is one of those goldfish things. This is where we learn that this entity is named Warp Sama. And Supreme Kai is able to relay the location of this goldfish to Kibito before they end up taking it. And there's an exchange here between Goku and the fish where Goku talks about how he looks like a fish and it makes Warp Sama upset. It's kind of funny.
It's fun. It feels very Goku. He's not good with social norms. So, and a few important details here are that they have to use the pin number to get into the demon realm, and Shin is not able to get that pin number back to Kibito, even though I think he gives him the destination, but not the pin number. The other thing that I like in this exchange too is that Warp Sama, you get the impression that Warp Sama is only going to let I think that they're referred to as Majin. So like Majin basically meaning demon people, effectively, because they start to refer to them more and more as Majin, that part's very interesting to me, because I thought Majin meant more like they look like Majin Buu. But then also Shin has to make uses magic, I guess, to make Goku's ears pointy so that Warp Sama will let Goku into the demon realm.
Yeah, it's an interesting detail. The pointy ears is definitely kind of an important point to hang on to. And Warp Sama looks at them, says, all right, Goku, you've got the pointy ears. You're a demon. You can travel with Glorio, who has access And as they're making their way through the Warp Sama rituals, we're shown the three different realms that Glorio could access, and he's from um, the third kingdom or the third realm. And it's the only place he has access to, whereas Goma is in the first one. So he's entering kind of at the most distant point from Goma he's able to enter from. But that's the closest he can get him. So they go through this portal, they end up in the third realm or the third kingdom, and we see a landscape that it almost looks familiar. It almost looks a little bit like a mix of maybe some Sandland and some of the Rocky Barrens that Goku and Vegeta had first fought in. Like it's this landscape that's familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, because as you look into the distance, you can see like floating rock formations and stuff like that. So the magical inspiration is there if you look around.
Yeah, I mean the sky is red. Like you immediately see this sort of like dragon thing flying around. It's I like the way that you described it, in it being kind of like both familiar and alien, because it feels very Dragon Ball, but it also feels like, oh, we're not on Earth anymore for sure. But it's also like I like the vibe that they're going for, because it feels much more like going on an adventure and exploring a new world. Like it's giving us that old original Dragon Ball feel of exploring.
There's also an interesting note where not long after they show up, there's this big hole in the ground with like this big yellow seal on it, and it's pointed out that apparently there was like this hole or pathway that connected the different kingdoms. But it's since been sealed off by some sort of light magic that doesn't allow access anymore. And I can only imagine that they pointed this out because it's going to be relevant.
I almost totally forgot about that part. There's so much detail in these.
Doesn't it feel like there's a million points where they're just like, remember this, remember this, remember this, remember this? And it's just like at some point, it's just like, I can't remember all this, man.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what comes up as being relevant.
Some of them could be red herrings for all I know. I don't know. Like I like that it's giving my brain something to think about and work through. I actually think it's a fun way to tell a story. We'll see if it pays off, but right now I'm actually kind of into it.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with you. So we're kind of finding out we need to get to, like you said, we're traveling in the third. I was checking. I think they call them, even though it's called the Demon Realm, these are called like the first, second, and third Demon World, and that's where I had confusion earlier, because the terms get weird.
We're in the Demon Realm, and the Demon Realm has 3 demon worlds in it.
I think that's how they break it down.
I'm going to go with that just for trying to use the same terminology for the rest of this pod. I'm going to double check on all this because I didn't realize how much I didn't know until I got halfway through this podcast.
There's so many little details and just very specific terminology. So we're doing our best here. We're trying to stay consistent with it. But they basically they land they're in the third demon world. They land the ship, and Goku gets out, and he's like, "Man, the air here feels heavy." And it's like a weird. You don't get the impression that it's like, we've seen gravity training in Dragon Ball a million different times. It doesn't quite have that same quality. It's not just that it's heavy gravity. It's literally the air feels heavy around you and makes you slow and hard to move. I can't remember at some point if they get into the flying here, where it's harder for them to fly still.
There's a couple things. There's a brief moment where like some bandits with like bows and arrows show up and attack them, and like the arrows are actually moving kind of comically slow in the air. And this is, I think, to emphasize that point you were talking about, where the gas slows things down. It's not just gravity. It's almost like it affects the way, like it affects time, but not your perception of time, if that makes sense. Like it slows everything down.
Yeah, 100%. There's also, man, there's so much. There's another little detail of Goku almost like following this creature off of a cliff that leads into, I have to check and see what it's called. The Sea of Darkness.
You gotta have the Sea of Darkness. I mean, I'm not gonna visit a place unless I got like a hotel, seafront view of the Sea of Darkness.
That's right. That's right. Got to see it right outside your window. But apparently, you don't want to fall into the Sea of Darkness. I think that they just say you'll perish instantly is the terminology they use. So, I mean, maybe that just means you don't go to any of the heavens or hells or whatever, but it's I don't know. Maybe this is going to be relevant moving forward too. There's a lot.
Well, so they decide that they're gonna stop for the night at a hotel in a small city, and then in the morning they're gonna continue their journey to see King Kadan, so that way Goku can speak with him about his potentially upcoming battle with the Demon King Goma. So Kadan is the king of this world, and then Goma is like the king of the realm, just to kind of emphasize the difference between these two titles. But they make it to this small town and the hotel, but before they can actually stay the night here, Goku needs to eat because Goku didn't finish eating before they left, which makes sense. It's a great point. And so they get their hotel rooms after negotiating a proper deal because for some reason everybody in the demon world is shady, which is mind blowing.
Shocker. One of the details we've kind of glossed over too is that they negotiate. Glorio is the one who he threatens the innkeeper, and he threatens him with a gun. He's got basically a laser gun, which I'm wildly curious about. I want to know, one, if this gun signifies any sort of like rank or title or position, because the guy, the innkeeper, just looks at the gun and is instantly intimidated. So I'm curious if that means the gun means something specific, or it's just, hey, I'm threatening you with a gun. I'm going to kill you with it. But then also, is it magic? Is it technology? Is it key?
You're never going to get that answer. You're never
So
going to
many
get
questions.
We'll never know.
So many questions.
All I know is that they got their two rooms, one for Goku and one for Supreme Kai. Or I'm sorry, one for Goku and Supreme Kai, one for Glorio himself. So he actually separated himself from the other two. I don't know if that's going to be relevant, but I made a note of it. But they go to a bar across the street to grab some food. Goku orders 5 burgers since he's not super hungry. So 5 burgers should about do it.
And these are massive burgers on top of that.
My favorite part about this is Goku says, "Man, these burgers are good. What's in them?" And Glorio goes, "Don't ask."
That's so good. And I mean, these guys are just kind of minding their own business, but they're surrounded by demons or Majin or whatever you call them at this point. I just want to say they've got great character designs. I'm very curious if these designs were made by Akira Toriyama, but if they weren't, they've definitely got the perfect Toriyama vibe to them, as this big hulking green, almost like frog looking fellow comes over to the table and is like, "Hey boy, you got round ears. You're not supposed to be here."
And of course, Glorio is just very matter of fact, step off. We don't want to fight. We don't want any of your business. Goku is just eating without a care in the world. Goku does not care. I think this guy even kicks Goku's chair out a little bit to threaten him, and it doesn't even phase Goku. He just keeps basically eating and just having a good time. And I don't know if you want to go into the details of how this fight really goes, because it's a very brief, but there's a lot that happens in it, and I don't think I took good enough notes if you want to take it away.
Yeah, I can definitely try to do that. It's packed. It's packed with action. So it kind of starts off as these guys, all these different demons surround the table, threatening them. Glorio really is the one who starts off the fight, throwing a drink into the big frog guy's face, and then following up by just delivering a punch to that guy. There's a wolf man that he gives a flying back fist. And then basically the whole bar comes over and starts attacking them. And this is when Goku finally gets involved. this is some of the action from the trailer, which I absolutely love, because Goku's first defense is just grabbing a plate, blocking a punch with it, grabbing another plate, like sandwiching the guy's hands, then like smashing the guy's face together with the plates. Again, one of the things that really has that sort of like Jackie Chan vibe to it.
It's kind of slapstick, right? Like it's a fight, it's battle, but it's like a light-hearted fight in a very not light-hearted setting. It's interesting.
It's great. I mean, the whole while Goku's face is stuffed with one of these cheeseburgers.
Can I say, oh God, my favorite part that I had to write down is there's this point in the middle of the fight where Goku's like doing like a cartwheel and he stops mid cartwheel to shove another burger in his mouth and keep fighting. It's so good. It is my favorite scene of this whole fight.
It's phenomenal. Like, I mean, Goku finishes his burgers, like beats up the big frog guy, does all these like backflips and somersaults, elbows one dude, almost gets an axe by another guy, and he's like, "Hey, you're cheating?" And then the guy can't even lift the axe out of the ground. And then it turns into like this whole brawl of him just I couldn't even do justice to the details of him just like whooping the asses of probably at least a half dozen of these other demons. But the choreography is phenomenal. The animation is fantastic. But yes, like you said, Dayton, it's much more of like it has much more of like a fun kind of silly, goofy vibe. But that doesn't detract from the action at all. In fact, I really like it.
I think the Jackie Chan comparison is actually a very good one here, because this isn't like, so in original Dragon Ball, I liked how it was almost like they were trying to blend martial arts with like the crazy rules of their universe with like stretchy arms and stuff like that. This is different. This is very like Goku is in a different class from these guys, right? Like this is not a challenge to him. So he's having fun with this. And so the choreography isn't focusing on the martial arts side of it. The story it's telling is how much of a different league Goku is to these, I guess, villains you would want to call them. And so that's what the choreography's telling me. So at first I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this choreography. It's kind of goofy. Then I watched it again. I was like, no, the choreography actually works, because what they're trying to tell me is that Goku's a kid and he's having fun. He's doing childish stuff because he's a 9-year-old or whatever it is. Like, so I actually like this. The first watch, I wasn't sure because I was looking for those original Dragon Ball vibes. And I think this is actually marching to the beat of its own drum. So it's taking me a minute to kind of wrap my head around it, because so many people, I think, wanted this to be original Dragon Ball. It's inspired by it, but it's its own series, and it makes me actually appreciate it more. I like that they're kind of taking old elements and then continuing them forward into the modern era. I think this is actually very well done.
That is, I really like your take on that, because that's actually a distinction that I hadn't been making in my head, but makes perfect sense now that you've expressed it that way. Because I was like, I've made the comparison to Jackie Chan, and I've also kind of mentally made the comparison to the original Dragon Ball in my head, because it's much more focused on the choreography, which so is Dragon Ball. But as you said, the original Dragon Ball is much more grounded in like a martial arts foundation, whereas this is not, well, not entirely anyway. It is much more,
it's not as focused on it, right?
Right. It's much more silly, and I mean, Goku's like doing somersaults and just like leaping into the air and stuff. Like, it's not as focused on the martial arts aspect of it, for sure. So it's definitely its own thing. It also doesn't feel like Dragon Ball Z or Super fighting, which is much more like serious and hardcore fighting, I suppose.
Put a pin in that for a moment, because we're getting close to the end of this episode and what we're covering. Because I want to talk about, because that leads into my feelings about Daima as a whole so far.
Mm-hmm.
And this really, it took me this fight scene to really get my head into the right space to actually enjoy this, because I think I was looking for Z and that wasn't there. And then I was looking for the original Dragon Ball and that wasn't quite there. And once I started realizing like what they were trying to do and who they were catering for, it all kind of snapped together and made sense to me. And I actually started really enjoying it after that. So that's more or less the conclusion I came to, but I want to talk a little bit more about it in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's only just a few brief little scenes following this fight as Goku effectively whoops the shit out of everybody in the tavern. And he even expresses like, "Hey, this is a good way for me to get the hang of my body, my small body in this world with like this heavy air and stuff." Uh, and I think we pretty much cut from that to them like sleeping, to the demon guys running away, and then the next day, Glorio, Shin, and Goku start to they go back to the ship so that they can get back on their way, and their ship is gone. It's been replaced with a weapon and a little note. I don't even remember what
Very
the note says.
specifically, the axe that the one guy tried to cut Goku in twain with a note attached to it. So we know exactly who took their car or their plane.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So, that's kind of, I think, the cliffhanger that they leave us on as there's some repercussions for our hero's actions in the tavern the night before.
And but quick thought in my head at first was just like, well, why didn't they just put it in a capsule? Oh, that's right. These aren't Capsule Corp vehicles, which is just something I'm so accustomed to when being in the Dragon Ball universe.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that, but that's a really good thought. And also a good point that this is the demon realm and we don't have capsules here. So that's very
I
interesting.
love reminders like that you're somewhere else. Like the things you take for granted and get so accustomed to. I love giving that moment where it's just like, that's removed. That's not something that happens here. And I think that was a very elegant way of putting that, of like, all right, well, you guys are in like this, this little town in the middle of nowhere, and your car stayed out overnight and it got stolen. You guys are up the creek right now. There's nothing for you to do.
Oh yeah, 100%. So, that's pretty much all of the episode content that we have. I want to talk about a couple of things. I don't know what order you want to do this in because I know we want to talk about like our impressions of Daima as a whole, but I also I want to talk about the episode titles briefly, and I want to talk about the opening and the ending.
Yes. Let
So,
me since I pretty much I pretty much completed my point of getting my head into the right space for Daima,
mhm.
because I had a lot of mixed feelings about Daima as a whole, right? It's not really the Dragon Ball content I was asking for. And I'm not gonna lie, Super kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I didn't enjoy Super a huge amount. I mean, there were so many areas of improvement that it could have had. It was kind of fillery. There were actually moments that break characters and break the lore of the universe that I didn't like. And so coming off of that into Daima, it was kind of a radical change of headspace for me, because we're not trying to continue the main story. This is a side quest, if you will. I don't even Is Daima canon?
Ooh, that's a hard question because Akira Toriyama was heavily involved in it, but there's no manga content for Daima, so
For now, I'm going to say no with an asterisk, because just like a lot of the old movies that aren't canon, it feels like they tried to find a spot between the series to stick the story. And typically when they do that, I'm like, it's probably not real. But it's there hasn't been a series that's been trying to tell the story in the same notes that Diamond's been telling, which is, we're just here to have fun. And we're going to reference the old stuff. We're going to do some fan service, but we're just going to have fun with this series. And I'm kind of glad that they just kind of mention stuff and keep moving on. And, there are rules, but whatever, we'll break the rules if it's something cool, or, we'll retcon something if it makes it more interesting for this series, because the second you say that this isn't canon, I don't have to care about any of that stuff. You can come up with whatever rules you want, and I'll be far less critical. But yeah, the headspace was the biggest thing for me to, I guess, get into the correct place to actually enjoy Daima. And that fight with Goku was the one that did it the most. And I'm glad you made the Jackie Chan reference, because that's exactly what it is. In those movies where Jackie Chan's fighting with all sorts of wacky things, Goku's doing the same thing here. He's got like a burger in his mouth. He's having a good time. And this is humor that I think isn't at the expense of the character, like we saw in Super, that like would piss me off. This is, I mean, Goku's a kid again, and he's fighting like a fighting savant, doing silly stuff because he's a kid. I think maybe the goldfish joke things were going a little too far down the hey, he's a kid, but it wasn't too terrible. That's more of a little critique. But I mean, so far, I think it's been pretty good once I kind of figured out what they were aiming for.
Yeah, I since you're kind of giving your impressions, I'll proceed with mine here too. In that, I think you had mentioned something important, Dayton, where we are considering like watching the dub and kind of comparing them. And it's I went through and I watched these episodes twice, episodes 1 through 3. I watched them early on when they came out, and then more recently as we're recording this. It's hard, it's very hard for me to separate my deep love for Dragon Ball and try to objectively give my impressions of this. I almost every episode I've literally had tears in my eyes because I've just just the nostalgia of it, getting to see Goku on the screen again, getting to see like the new animations and everything, and getting to see this new story being told. And I mean, admittedly too, to Daima's credit, a lot of that is also getting to see this done in beautiful animation, good choreography, getting to see an anime that has been produced not only with Akira Toriyama's like heavy involvement, but also one that was actually given time to be produced with quality in mind versus just cranking something out like Super did, especially at the
It's
very
nice
beginning.
not having episodes and being like, oh, this is obviously like B-roll stuff, and we're waiting for the heavy episode. Like, there's just good animation just out of nowhere. You're like, oh wow, Goku twirling that staff looked really good. I don't know why, but like it looked awesome.
I would much rather have that and have every moment have that polished animation than have what we had in Super, where you have multiple episodes that look like, I mean, no offense to the animators, but truly look like children drew them.
Well, like
It's just that
rushed.
they were rushed. Exactly. Um, I I have been loving Daima. If I have to like kind of step back and give any of my critiques about it, occasionally the pacing is a little bit weird to me. Um, it's not even that it's bad. It's just that I know that this is going to be a shorter series, and sometimes they're taking a long time on beats that I feel like could be, they're not important beats. Like Goku getting his power pole, it wasn't even really that long. It was probably like 2 minutes of an episode, but I was like, this really could have been, 20, 30 seconds instead. Like there's lots of places where it feels like you could be tightening this up a bit. Including like the recap of the Boo arc when we are introduced to Degasu and Goma. I feel like that could have been condensed, even though it was kind of like an extra long first episode. Um, the the it's hard to really like gauge or judge the characterization for Goku. Like you said, Dayton, where like the goldfish thing is pretty childish. It's hard to say how much of that is them writing, like it does feel a little bit against Goku's character as an adult, but he has been turned into a six. I think he's a first grader, so I think he's like 6 years old roughly. So he's been turned into a child, and it's like, okay, how much of that is affecting his personality? So I'll give them some leeway on that. Overall, I'm absolutely loving it. Like, props. This has been fantastic and a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. It's been, like I said, once I got my head into the right space, it all snapped. It all made sense. It's like, you know what? I'm actually having a good time because I didn't know what lens to view it for or view it through until we got, like I said, into that Goku fight scene. It didn't really snap for me. And I think they're doing a good job. And I agree with you 100% about the animation quality thing, where I would like more series like this where it's shorter, it's higher quality, it's more meat and potatoes and less fluff. I love the storytelling method that they're using right now. I wish they would just use it for more stuff. Like, I mean, if Super was cut down into like a 12 episode, like mega awesome series, man, that would be so cool. That would be so awesome. Just everything is just super high quality. All the just fillers cut out and we're straight into the action. Oh, you could absolutely tell Super in a 12 episode series where everything's just phenomenal. All the great fights you could have. I love the storytelling method. If anything, I want people to watch and support this just that way. Hopefully they do more like this.
I very much agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, yeah, I could gush about this. I've really enjoyed it so far, and it's also like just my deep love for Dragon Ball. But I don't have a lot to like when I watched Super, I had a lot that I was complaining about.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot to complain about with this. It just
My biggest
is,
complaint is this isn't the story I would have asked for if I had to ask for a series. And that's always going to kind of be the thing that hangs over Daima a little bit, is that this feels like a side quest, a filler series in a way. I wish this would have been something that was a little bit more a part of the main Dragon Ball story that could be enshrined into it. Because right now it's in this weird outlier territory where I don't know how to treat it amongst everything else.
You actually make a really good point there. I think a lot of the fan base said the same thing when those first Diamond trailers came out. People were mad. I feel like the fan base has kind of turned the
winds
other
are changing.
direction. Yeah, which is good. But I will say, to add on to your criticism there, that the one thing that I really don't like is where they decided to insert this into the timeline, being between Z and Super. And it's not because of the position in the timeline, it's because we know what happens after this series. So there are almost zero stakes. Like, characters cannot die. There's nothing really bad can happen to our heroes or to the Earth or anything, because they have to go into what happens in Super.
The one thing that they could have done, and we haven't seen it yet, is you can do something like they've done where you insert a story like that, but you also have to bring along new characters into that story that you could build relationships with, right? And so far, I don't care if Glorio dies. The main villains, I don't know, they're villains. I don't care. They're demon people. You haven't really introduced a new character for me to care about. And so they could have added stakes. They haven't done it yet.
That's a really good point. And I don't think, like, I agree with your take on Glorio and the villains so far. I don't think that we can count them out just yet, though. Like, I don't think we've gotten a lot.
I agree with you, but I'm just saying we're a quarter of the way through the series and you haven't established that yet.
Yeah, that's it's a good point. And I think that's part of my issue with the pacing too.
Yep.
Is that it feels like it's like, if this were a longer series, I think the pacing would be great.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's a shorter series, I'm like, we're really taking our time with some of these beats that we just don't have the time to give.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that it kind of feels that way because of where they picked? There's so many things that they need to like tune down in order to tell this story that like we have to spend an episode or two just to be like, all right, this is why he's not flying. This is why he's not teleporting. This is why he's not doing X, Y, and Z. Like we're spending so much time finding ways to tune down the power level and to shrink the world a little bit. Like that it's almost distracting at this point where it's just like, I almost wish we would have just had a fresh story somewhere else, because we have to explain why you can't just do all these things. And it takes so much time. We're spending so much of the series just like explaining all this. I don't know. It's very complicated. Whenever you insert a story like this, especially one that is trying to deviate so radically from the main story so much, there's a lot of rules you have to establish. And I feel like the first 3 episodes, the majority of it was just establishing those rules and the storyline and the framing.
Yeah, very much so. I pretty much agree with everything you had to say about that. It definitely spends a lot of time doing that. Spends a lot of time establishing the scenario, how we have those like barriers or boundaries to tell this story. It also does, to its credit, it also does a lot of world building. Gives us a lot of information, almost overwhelmingly so. Um, which I love the world building that they've done. But yeah, I agree with you as far as like they really had to they had to jump through a lot of hoops, and that's, well, maybe just a problem of power scaling in Dragon Ball in general. But
I think it's hard for me to I like that they're doing world building. I'm not going to comment too much on it right now because I feel like because we just got to the demon world, we're really going to start exploring that now because we've got some macro decisions where how the demon realm is set up, how to get there, how to get out. I actually think a lot of that's a lot of fun. We're going to a magical realm. I like that the process of getting there and getting out feels kind of magical. I think
mhm.
it's fun. We've got different kingdoms, we've got different characters at play. There's probably political powers vying for dominance, and we're going to see some of that here soon. I don't want to say too much right now because we've kind of just barely set the table with it. And so I want to see where they go because I think how they actually execute on the things they're putting into play right now will determine whether I like it or not. I like the direction, but man, they're trying to do a lot with only 12 episodes to fit everything into. So it's going to be a challenge for them to pull it off.
Yeah, yeah. I know originally their plan was 12 episodes. I'm curious to see if that's what we end up getting is just 12 episodes. I'm not sure if that's what they ended up finishing and deciding on, because they've made they've made a lot of like last minute changes in a good way, which we'll talk about when we talk about like the opening and ending and stuff. But yeah, I mean, we're honestly getting pretty nitpicky to find criticisms, in my opinion. Which, I mean, is it? That's, I think it's good that we're talking about those things. That's, I mean, that's what we do. It's the podcast to talk about those things. But overall, I'm pumped, man. Like I really like the direction. I love the quality, the animation, and the fight choreography has been really fun. Uh, I don't have a lot to complain about. I'm really, even the points that we mentioned, I
They're
still feel
hinting
like
at a
I'm
20 episode run.
there. You go. See, so we'll at least have a little bit longer to get there. So we'll see. We'll see how the
20
pacing
episodes
turns
makes
out.
more sense for all the things that they're trying to fit in here because it's, I mean, there's so many characters they're trying to set up. There's so many power dynamics and politics and world building. There's all this stuff. 12 episodes wouldn't be enough. So 20 episodes feels a lot more appropriate.
Yeah, if we were at this point in 3 episodes for a 12 episode run, I would say they cannot tell the story they want to tell. But 20 episodes, I think they can do it.
Okay. Yeah, that's feeling a lot better. You want to talk about the episode titles?
I do. So and you did a good job of having those ready as usual. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting about these is every episode title is just a short one word title. Do you have the list of them in front of you at all?
I can just rattle off all three. I've got Conspiracy, Glorio, and Daima.
So I really like the episode titles for several reasons. One, most of the episode titles that we've gotten, especially for the original Japanese titles in Dragon Ball in the past, and really just anime in general, are wild spoilers. They're like paragraphs about what happens in the episode. Like, Super Saiyan Goku defeats Frieza. It's like, what?
Can I say that I actually have grown to love those titles with the exception of the spoiler part? Like, I
Okay.
would love it if they made it a paragraph but didn't spoil the episode. If they could just do that, it would be amazing.
There would be some comedy to that in my mind. The problem that I have, though, is that they're usually a paragraph that tells you every detail
Yeah.
in the episode.
I mean, yeah, it didn't bother me when I had already seen the entire series. It's like, oh yeah, that's this episode.
Right, sure, and that's fair. But even watching it dubbed, like gosh, on Toonami, they still had some spoilery content
It's
in
like
the
a villain
titles.
finally defeated. It was just like, cool.
Yeah, like why do I need to watch the episode? I just found out what's going to happen. So I like that they kind of truncated that down. I also just they're just like they feel punchy and appropriate. Glorio's great. Daima is effectively like the demon realm is what Daima means. What do you have the first one again? What was the first one?
The first one was conspiracy,
Conspiracy. Okay, so that's like we're talking about Goma and Degasu and maybe Dr. Arinsu there.
kind of
So
conspiring against Goku and the people who defeated Boo. So yeah. Also,
I mean,
Dr. Arinsu kind of sewing like the threads of deceit amongst the other demon members. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conspiring against each other happening.
they're great. They're great episode titles. Like after you watch the episode, you're like, oh, that's a perfect episode title, and it's not spoiling anything.
No, and I mean this feels much more modern as far as like the way you would name episodes. And I'm I'm I like them. I think they're slick, they're straight to the point. They miss some of the charm that I don't watch a ton of anime, so I only really associate those types of titles with Dragon Ball. So for me, I expect this big spoilery horrible paragraph of a title for me to read off every time we go into an episode.
That's fair. I could definitely see that take on it. For
It's
me, I
very non-objective, my opinion of this.
absolutely. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff that we got in Daima is touching on that nostalgia, and the episode titles are definitely not doing that part. So
The one thing I wanted to touch on is that these 3 episodes were going to be or are being released, have already been released as a movie. How do you feel about these 3 episodes being a movie in the movie theater?
I personally, I like it. I well, I guess with a caveat, I like it because I like that it brings hype and attention to Dragon Ball. I like having the option to actively like go into the theater and make it an experience and see it on the big screen. All that is super cool to me. I like it for promoting, and marketing, all that stuff. I have a feeling I know at least one reason that you brought this up, and part of that for me, one of the reasons why I'm like, it would be kind of weird to see in the theater is really just where it ends. Like it ends on this cliffhanger of like, oh, these guys lost their ship, and it's like, oh well, okay. There's no there's not any sort of resolution there
It is
at
a
all.
very weak hook. Like when this ends, and I thought, if I stopped here, like if I was in the theater and the movie ended here, I would be asking, where the hell is the other half of the movie? And I'm not kidding. Like it's that fight was fun. That is not a climactic like hook in mouth moment where it's just like, oh shit, like that's awesome and I do want to watch more of this. I did not walk away from this 3rd episode thinking that, especially if I think about it through the eyes of somebody who's maybe more casual or hasn't watched a lot of Dragon Ball and decided to check it out. Really, really bizarre. This man, I feel like every good Dragon Ball movie, all my favorite ones, have that big climactic battle at the end of it. Like that thing that really pushes everything together. You get the fancy animation, you get the big awesome key blasts and that defining moment where you see our hero kind of standing against all odds and winning the day sort of thing. There was none of that in this. No one was ever actually challenged in a fight. This in the entire 3 episodes. So if I go into the theater and I watch this, I'm disappointed. I'm sorry, but that is a bad 3 episodes to put in theater in front of people. I think it's a great 3 episodes for a series. It is not a good movie. I do have to critique that. And that's why I wanted to bring this up and mind you, if I saw this me personally, without any qualifiers, if I go into the theater and watch this, I actually enjoy it. I think it's a good time. I'm also going to watch it anyway because I'm on a podcast where I talk about it. But for like the regular person who's like your casual anime guy or just regular Joe Blow who's thinking about getting into it, I don't think this is a great experience for someone to go into the theater and, you know, experience Dragon Ball. Or if you love Dragon Ball as a kid and you want to go watch some Dragon Ball stuff, this is not the best sample of what you remember.
I totally agree with you. I almost wonder, you can't really do a single episode. Like, you couldn't just do the first episode. I wonder if they could have made it longer. I wonder if there's another episode past this. We haven't necessarily watched them yet, so I wonder if there would have been an episode past this that would have been in a better stopping point.
I'm half tempted to go watch the theatrical run to see if it's like different, or if maybe my opinion changes if I go and watch it in theater, which is like, oh no, actually it works good. I'm just, I don't know, stupid. Which has happened.
That would be funny. The only thing that I'm aware of that is different, and there could be other stuff, but there's supposed to be, I think it's from the voice actress for Goku and maybe somebody else in there who's like introducing the episodes and like thanking people for coming to see it in the theater and stuff, which is totally cool, but I don't think it would change how people feel about consuming the episode content itself.
So wait, is this supposed to be viewed as like a Kickstarter? Like I'm supposed to go see it because I'm helping kickstart Dragon Ball or something? Is that...
I definitely need it after 40 years.
No, it's really interesting. That's the one thing that I really am missing after these 3 episodes is I'm missing just like a good fight. And I wish I would have had one. And if you put one in here and stick it in the movie theater, like I go and I buy a ticket tomorrow and I watch it again in the theater because I loved watching the superhero movie in theater, seeing that big climactic final battle of the big screen where like the speakers are shaking my seat as they're exchanging blows. There's something special about that. And man, Dragon Ball in its finest moments looks so good on the big screen.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Even, I mean, all the most recent movies being released in theaters have been awesome. I mean, the Broly movie is another one that
I
was
didn't see any of them
phenomenal.
in theater.
Oh, really?
No, I really didn't like watch that much Dragon Ball until we started getting ready for this podcast. Like I just kind of randomly started watching like Dragon Ball Super out of nowhere because I was like, oh yeah, I like Dragon Ball. I'll watch the new stuff.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, anyone that's been in theaters, I think I've seen, at least of recent years, I think I've seen in theaters. So it's just cool to see them in theaters. It's one of the reasons why I might actually go to a local theater and see it. But yeah, I mean, you and I are on the same page about it. It feels a little anticlimactic, and it truly doesn't have like a really cool like big fight with a bad guy in it, which is a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to take these 3 episodes and I have to go, all right, how do you compare to the Battle of Gods movie? How do you compare to the Broly movie? No, definitely not. How do you compare to, like, you start getting down to where if these 3 episodes were a movie, it would be amongst the original Dragon Ball series movies, which is not the best compliment I think I can give it. And that's just because this is all build up. This is all set up. This is world building. This is all great content, but not for a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Let's see. We talked about the titles, the movie. The only other thing that I have, unless you have something else you want to talk about, Dayton, is the opening and the ending.
Yeah.
So
I guess I'll just give my quick opinions.
Sure.
Because I already kind of mentioned in the beginning where I don't like how we did a recap and then jumped over to the new characters and then did another recap. That was really jarring to me. So the pacing at the beginning was really like weird. I love the introduction of the new characters. It felt very Toriyama. I love their design. I love how they showed them. Once you realize where in the storyline they're sticking it, it makes sense. I would say the beginning of it is we kind of get off to the races. Once we get past that rocky recap start, it starts moving along fairly well. As far as the ending goes, I don't know. Like, I am left wanting more, so I don't mind where we left. Like the place that they're at, it almost feels like Moss was it Moss Eisley in Star Wars? Like that kind of rough and tumble edge of civilization, hive of scum and villainy place that we're at right now. And I love that the hotel innkeeper or whatever was trying to rip them off, and then the people in the bar noticed they were outsiders and tried to beat them up. I like that it feels like we're in a rough and tumble place. So it's the world building so far has been very good. So it might mask some of the flaws that you may point out, but so far I'm actually, aside from a couple small things, I'm fairly happy with it.
Okay, yeah, and so two things. One, I should have been a little bit more clear. What I meant when I said the opening and ending, I actually meant like the musical opening and ending, which we don't.
My bad. I was like, we already kind of talked about this, but yeah, I can give it again. But no,
I know. So yeah, I mean, we mostly talked about that what you described already. So I won't give my take on that already, or again rather. But the funny thing is, probably one of the reasons you were confused about that is because the first episode doesn't really have an opening and ending.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah, that was part of the confusion, I think. So I should have been a little more clear. But in the second and third episode, we do get a proper musical opening and ending. Do you? I mean, I could talk about these all day long. Do you have any thoughts about them? Do you want me to give mine first before you give
yours first? Because I kind of plowed through these episodes.
Sure.
As I'm learning, being a parent soaks up a lot more time than I ever expect. So it's a new adjustment for me. But go ahead and give your opinions, and then hopefully that'll rattle my opinions loose.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So a few important details here. Actually, before I even give my thoughts on it, one of the things that I was alluding to earlier is that, well, as most Dragon Ball fans probably know already, earlier this year, I think in March, Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, passed away. And so he was heavily involved in Daima's production, which is phenomenal, fantastic. I love it. And he, after following his passing, at least as best I understand, they had at least planned an intro, like an opening and ending for Daima, and they basically scrapped them following Akira Toriyama's passing, and they said they wanted to go a completely different route and make like effectively a tribute to Akira Toriyama. So knowing that, that's kind of what I want to talk about for the opening and ending. Moving into them, the John Jacka John, the song for the opening is phenomenal.
I would say, yeah, I really need to go back and rewatch it again, because now I'm like, actually, I think it's very good, but I need to rewatch it again with that in mind, because I don't think I gave it the attention that it probably deserved. So yeah, my opinion is that it's very good. I need to watch it again because I don't think I sat down and appreciated what they were specifically going for, because I wasn't keeping that in mind when I was watching it. So yeah, it makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, I do want to. I'll give a little bit of my take on it. Maybe I'll prompt you about this again next time when you have a chance to.
I'll definitely not forget to rewatch it and pay attention to it. Definitely won't.
But I did want to talk about this a little bit briefly because of one, because I think they are phenomenal, but also because they are specifically, like, there are specific details that are awesome tributes to Akira Toriyama. But the music is incredible. They do a great job of kind of like showing the cast, giving us this like adventure feeling. And I think one of the important details that I kind of wanted to point out, I'm trying to like scrub through the entry and find it, but even the lyrics specifically are designed for Dragon Ball. It talks about like summoning Shenron and come forth Shenron and grant my wish and all this stuff, and talks about like going on different adventures. But in the intro, there's like this shot of Goku as an adult on the Nimbus flying through the clouds, and you kind of see these like these white feathers, these white birds feathers, or maybe even angel feathers that he's like surrounded by, and this like white light that shines down on Goku surrounded by all these feathers. And for anybody who doesn't know, Akira Toriyama, his last name Toriyama, Tori means bird in Japanese, and he even had his own, I think it was his own production studio in Japan called Bird Studios. And so the God, it's making me emotional just talking
I
about
would say
it.
that's a lot that
The
they were able to wrap into this. And I mean, when you're in the middle of production like that, being able to stop and kind of change course and be able to pull off something, I am glad that they were able to kind of immortalize Toriyama into this series. Like it's as much as you don't want a situation like this to happen. I'm glad that they were able to kind of secure him into this series like this in the way that they did, because that's actually quite beautiful.
Yeah, 100%. The and then to say nothing of the ending does maybe an even better job of that sort of tribute. But the ending has some really cool shots that actually are throwbacks to some of the GT endings and openings, which is really cool, with different characters, but you get to see like the cast together by the water and stuff, which is very much like one of the shots in the GT ending. Um, but specifically at the very end of the ending scene, there's a shot of Kid Goku like standing on a cliff looking up into the sky, and you see those same feathers from the opening coalesce and come together into the shape of this white bird that like flies up into the sunset, into the light. And it is a beautiful tribute to the creator Akira Toriyama. So I'm over here like getting all teary-eyed, so I apologize, but it's just incredible. Like I really really love that they went out of their way to make that tribute to Akira Toriyama.
No, and I mean it's hard for me to follow that up because I think you put it into words very well. And I'm, like I said, I'm glad that we're able to kind of really cement him and in a way immortalize him into this series like that with such a beautiful tribute. I'm glad that he was able to actually be heavily involved, and that we have got something that he worked on, was very passionate about, for him to leave us with. Because he's, I mean, his impact and everything has been huge. His impact on the entire anime universe has been, or manga universe, or whatever, creative, the entire creative sphere. Like, he's bigger than just a genre, really, at this point.
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah, truly.
So I agree with you. It's very good.
You'll have to dig into it with all that in mind. It's man, it blows me away. Like I was just really impressed with what they did with it. So it's clearly very emotional for me get to see his final work and get to see that they really went out of their way to really
and
give
you
that
never
tribute
hear
to
about
him.
a studio, or not never, you rarely hear about a studio stopping and doing the right thing. You almost always hear about, oh, well, they got to make time slots and they have to do this and the budget wasn't there. It's nice that they took the time and actually they're doing something the way it should and needs to be done. And it's always heartening to hear that.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, it's, very sad for the anime and manga community and the, just the world in general, to lose an amazing creator like Akira Toriyama, but it's also really, really cool to see his legacy, his final work in Daima, and get to see that even though he is gone, his work is going to continue on and continue to influence fans. I mean, throughout time. So what a beautiful like send off for the creator.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know, just the images of Goku, dropping back into that iconic power pole stance, thinking about Toriyama's legacy and how that pose is so iconic to Goku in the beginning of the journey, and just all that stuff wrapped up with remembering Toriyama. It works together probably a little bit too well. So I think, man, there's a lot of good things to say about this series. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, I think that's probably not a bad place to wrap things up on.
I was thinking the same thing. I think that's probably a great note to end on here. So yeah, we gave all of our thoughts about it. It's really well done. I'm excited to see more of it. But that's going to be it for this episode of Instant Transmission, where we discuss everything Dragon Ball. This has been your host, Todd.
And Dayton.
Don't forget, we're on Patreon and Discord. If you want to... I should have changed that.
We're doing it live.
That's right. We're doing it live. So we'll just say, if you want to make our Power Pole extend, you can find us at Patreon.com.
At the beginning. Cool.
We're doing it full circle. Full circle. If you want to find us at patreon.com/ITDBpodcast, or the Discord link will be in the episode description. You can also find it and all of our links at linktree/ITDBpodcast. That's linktr.ee/ITDBpodcast. Thank you all so much for your support. Be sure to join us next time as we continue exploring the Demon Realm in Dragon Ball Daima. Ooh. Goku, Shin, and Glorio still have a ways to travel to find King Goma. But having their ship stolen puts a wrinkle in their plan to save Dende and undo Goma's wish. How are our heroes going to traverse the rest of the Demon Realm? What nefarious plans does Dr. Arinsu have brewing? Why does Master Roshi look like Saitama from One Punch Man? Find out next time. And to all our fellow Dragon Ball fans, stay safe out there, and remember to keep rocking the dragon.
You know, after talking about Toriyama, following it up with power pole jokes is probably not the best.
Yeah, that's fair.
We'll work on that.